Hi, I'm Mickey Satkiewicz, and this is my presentation on Dawoud Bey. Dawoud Bey is an American photographer who is known for his portraiture in relation to community and minority subjects with a side interest in photographing the urban environment. So, not only did he do portraiture, or just urban environment, but he actually collaborated with the two and put them together. Um, so while I was doing my starting my research for this paper, I googled just to get a basis idea of who he was, what he did, the big significant points, so that way I can narrow it down, focus on a few things, and dig a little deeper. So one of the sites I came across was thehistorymakers.org, and so this site did a very extensive interview with him, and I got quite a bit of information from him about his life, his schooling, his time growing up, his career, just what went on through his head in the bits and pieces of his life that kind of got him where he is today. So Dawoud Bey was born in November of 1953 in Queens, New York. He was given the name David Edward Smickle at birth, but he changed his name in the 1970s. Many African Americans did during that time. His parents, Mary Smickle and Kenneth Smickle. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about his parents. So Mary Smickle was very, very involved in Dawoud's school life. She was very active there. So she would be at the parent-teacher meeting. She would be helping out in like bake sales or anything that needed to be done. She was there. And Kenneth Smickle, he was someone that Dawoud really looked up to. Um, the reasoning behind that is Kenneth Smickle was one of the first black people to rise to a significant level in the electronic engineering field. His specialty was microwave electronics. But he decided that, as time went on and he got older, he decided he wanted to do something else. So he went back to school and got a master's degree in education. And so he got his master's degree in education from UMass Amherst. But then, not only did he just graduate from there, he later became the acting assistant dean of the School of Engineering based on his, experience in the field and his doctorate with the education. Dawoud's wife, her name is Candida Alvarez, and they have a son named Ramon Alvarez Smickle. Um, some bits and pieces of information from when he was growing up. His second grade teacher, Miss Hortense Jones, had quite an impact on his childhood life growing up because she was one of the first African American teachers he had. And unlike the other teachers he had had in his growing up years in school, she had a different viewpoint on color. So a lot of Dawoud's teachers growing up assumed because he was a person of color that he couldn't be smart. So when he got really good grades or he did something really succeedingly, they thought he cheated. And so he loved school, but because of these little factors of, claiming he was cheating or he wouldn't amount to anything, he actually became a really, really against school. He hated it. But Miss Hortense Jones made a difference with him because she believed in him and, she encouraged him to be whoever he wanted to be. There were no limits with her. And then he kind of got started in his photography after his godfather's death, his godmother gave Dawoud his godfather's camera, and he didn't know how to use the camera. So for about roughly a year after he was given this camera, he didn't touch it. But then he kind of started getting interested in it, and he loved to read. So he took his love of reading to go get a whole bunch of books, check them out, and basically taught himself how to use the camera. So then after I got this basic information, I went to EBSCOhost through the NIU library, and I found this article, A Genius Behind the Camera, photographer Dawoud Bey was named a MacArthur Fellow. So this was like later down in his career. He was one of 24 recipients of the MacArthur Fellowship Award. This award was for $265,000 that would be distributed quarterly for 5 years with no strings attached. He used the money to accelerate production of his work, but he also used it for regular expenses such as, food, transportation, and then he did use it for a bit of for himself to keep him energized. So a bit of his hobbies that he had other than his career. So the next article I found on EBSCOhost was Dawoud Bey, 2 American Projects. So this article gives us background information and reflects on the 2 American Projects series. It's a continuation of the Birmingham Project. This series was created for the 50th anniversary of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. With this bombing, 4 African American girls died. So with his series, he did a diptych for those 4 victims. So during this series, he had taken images of some of the survivors from that bombing, and also placed images of little girls that would have been the same age as those girls that had died in the bombing. I found another article, for his project, An American Project. So this article looks at his images in the series. If you're looking at basically, I'm going to quote the article here. If you're looking at one of Dawoud Bey's images, the photographer suggests you look not at the face, but at the hands. And as Dawoud Bey says, hands are very important. They are expressive. So the images are of African Americans posed in ways that are to make the viewers experience what the people in the photograph are experiencing. It has intimacy by the people in the images looking directly at the camera to the viewer. So instead of the person looking away or glancing off to the side, doing an activity, the person that is getting their photograph taken is looking directly at the camera. So when the viewer goes to look at these printed images, it's like they're standing right in front of you. The images were actually printed life-size, so it was very immersive. And then here's another quote by Dawoud Bey. I think my background in music is what allows me to feel confident, improvising in situations, not knowing what's going to happen, he says, but having a clear sense of the parameters that I'm functioning with, whether it's the space of the photographic frame or whether it's the bar in music. So I found a article that gave a brief statement on the Studio Museum in Harlem. Now, the Studio Museum in Harlem is the museum in which Dawoud Bey did a lot of his beginning. It was kind of like the place that gave him the start to his career. He did a lot of kind of like internshipping there, and then after a while of him being exposed there, getting to know the people, they actually asked him to teach a couple courses. So he taught there for a little while, and then he later had a exhibition there on a series he took in Harlem. So the Studio Museum in Harlem opened in 1968 in a loft on Upper Fifth Avenue in New York before moving to West 125th Street. The institution was devoted to African American artists such as Dawoud Bey, Elizabeth Catlett, Nanette Carter, and Lyle Ashton Harris. So I also found like a little excerpt for his series on the exhibition Harlem on My Mind. So it talks about Bey's inspiration that came from the exhibition Harlem on My Mind when he was 16 years old. So the exhibition Harlem on My Mind was kind of like this exhibition where a lot of African Americans were displeased with it. They were upset, and there were people that were outside of this museum that it was in protesting, and the enragement that came from it was what actually caught Dawoud Bey's attention from it. And so he decided he was going to go to the Studio Museum in Harlem, jump on board on the picket line, and protest this exhibition with them. So when he finally got there and he goes to the Studio Museum in Harlem to jump on that picket line, no one was there. There was no picket line anymore. So since he was there, he decided he was going to go inside and just take a look at the art. And he actually really enjoyed it. He got a lot of inspiration from the series. So it inspired him to create his series called Harlem, USA. And he exhibited it later in the Studio Museum in Harlem because he wanted the community in which the project was made to see the work. And then another thing I found on EBSCO was Dawoud Bey at Gurney Boven and Less. So it's a form of press release that talks about Dawoud Bey's work photographing people. It talks about some of the cameras he used. He used a 35mm with black and white film. He used a large format 4x5 view camera, as well as the 20x24 Polaroid. His work is expressing not only his thoughts and emotions, but also the thoughts and emotions of the people he is photographing, giving his images a two-way mirror effect, in a sense. And this is Dawoud Bey, the man with a vision.